Okay, welcome everybody. This is Legislative Review Committee, Thursday, January 21st. Thanks for joining us. The agenda is online with the calendar of this meeting. And we do have a quorum. And Sarah, you've got noted who's here with the whole group. Thank you. I guess we need to consider the October 15th minutes, of which Mariah and I were the only ones present. Mariah, would you like to start that?
Sure. A motion that we approve?
I'll second it. I don't usually do that, but I think it's relevant at this point. And then we'll vote on accepting those minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous. Okay, so now I've already missed Deborah because she was my lead person, but we will accept you in her absence, Blaine, to take it from here and get us started on the agenda and the staff that want to talk to us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I know I'm not worthy, but I appreciate y'all letting me be here, and appreciate Sarah being diligent in getting all the documents out to you in advance. Welcome to our two new members. So today we've got the agenda approved by the chair, and we're going to start with a review of the LEED certification program. And Andrew Saunders is here to speak about that. We also have our sustainability officer, Mike Wharton. And I think, Andrew, you're going to kind of bring us up to speed on where we've been and get us back into a current day and posture.
Yes, sir. So the LRC review of LEED actually goes back into summer of 2018 when former Mayor Denson asked that it be reviewed. Prior to that, and still in effect today, is the policy that was adopted in 2007. So the current Athens-Clarke County policy broadly says that Athens-Clarke County will build LEED certified buildings for facilities that are owned and operated by the government that are over 5,000 square feet. And that needs to be new construction or a really significant renovation. We've had that policy in practice since 2007, and for the most part, it has gone really well. But when we were building Cooperative Extension and New Fire Station 2, it came up for a variety of reasons, one of which was a desire to constrain costs. We were seeing an escalation of construction costs. And so that is where the committee started with the work, was how much are we paying to participate in this program, and what are the benefits? And generally, the actual participation fees were quite low, and that was shared with previous LRCs. You're talking about thousands or low tens of thousands of dollars on multi-million-dollar projects, and those fees are used to move the project through certification, which includes review by the U.S. Green Building Council staff, and engagement with our architects and engineers, and kind of this dialogue about what compliance looks like. And so upon review of that, there was a general consensus that, okay, that is probably an okay thing to pay for. Since then, we've gone through numerous iterations of what this could look like. At one point, there was a review of an internal policy where we would have, similar to what the state does, we would just have our own kind of Athens green building policy. Ultimately, it was not the recommendation of staff that we go that way because we reinvent the wheel. There's already multiple organizations that offer this up. And we shift what is otherwise a construction cost into a heavy operational cost for staff within the sustainability office, the SPLOST office, and many of our operational departments. The committee reviewed the option to use the ASHRAE code, and ultimately the desire was not to go directly to the ASHRAE Sustainable Building Code as the only solution because of the lack of flexibility that was provided in it. So then we looked at what are the other systems that are available. LEED has been a good system. It has produced high-performing buildings for us, but there's been an evolution. So with all of these systems, as technology has grown, as building practices have diversified, you've actually seen the goalposts move, and that's been an understandable outcome. But there's a little bit of a question of pace. So, for example, every single building that Athens-Clarke County has built today, including LEED Gold projects that are in the ground, we provided some analysis that showed that none of them would meet the minimum certification requirement today. And so that's been a challenging point of adjustment for our design teams. Also, we're finding certain certification systems fill certain niches better. So, for example, there's a certification system called Earthcraft Light Commercial that seems to really shine on smaller commercial buildings, especially if they're existing. And so we actually saw a for-profit entity in Athens achieve this certification recently, and that was Williams and Associates over in the Southern Mills complex. Meanwhile, we looked at a system called Green Globes, which is a little bit more prescriptive. You qualify more on the front end, and there's less back end work, and that shines on large campus projects like parks. And so it was our recommendation came back and said, look, we actually recommend you allow multiple paths to compliance. That would be LEED certified, Earthcraft Light Commercial certified, or Green Globes with their second tier certification. We also brought forward a policy that has minimum maintenance standards and minimum design standards that would exist for all Athens-Clarke County buildings. So these are really the things that we know we cannot live without, or we would really not want to live without. And that would apply to buildings regardless of their size. And those include things like LED lighting, high efficiency irrigation, designing the site in mind for material reuse and recycling. And so that's really where the policy has landed today, is brought forward a policy that would apply to Athens-Clarke County buildings, has minimum maintenance and construction standards, and then going back to kind of that old trigger point, new construction and major renovations over 5,000 square feet would take one of those three outside certification systems. One thing that I do want to caution this group about is when it comes to building sciences and new construction, universal prescription is very, very, very difficult. So, for example, if you were to just look at how HVAC systems, air conditioning systems within commercial buildings work, you can have everything from massive chillers to heat pumps to gas-powered furnaces. There's a real diversity of equipment and roles. And so you have to be fairly conservative with your prescriptions. Otherwise, you're going to end up very quickly having a prescriptive outcome that is infeasible in some building scenario, which is why we continue to recommend third-party systems, because they are a little bit of a choose-your-own adventure. There are ways to qualify for energy, water, air quality, transportation, and so on. And so it allows the design team, instead of to just say, okay, we've got to meet A, B, C, and D, they say, well, what's the purpose of this building? What are we trying to enhance? What is it about this building that we can leverage through a certification system and really allow to shine? And then just for context, there was the LRC did go on an adventure of private sector implementation. This really goes to the previous LEED policy. We've seen some kind of quasi-government implementation. So, for example, when Columbia Brookside was done and Athens-Clarke County put some public dollars into that, one of the requirements of the commission at the time was that they comply with our green building certification, and that site did so. It's still my recommendation that be the approach that the commission take. If you try to hybridize a policy to be designed for public and private, again, you're going to run into unintended consequences very quickly. And so the policy that is before you today really focuses on Athens-Clarke County getting its house in order first. And so with that, I think I will just pause.
Okay, thank you for that review. I do agree with that overall strategy of us, no pun intended, leading by good example and getting our house in order to exemplify what we're looking for and potentially points, I guess, for others. That, if I remember correctly, that little side study that we did for the private sector, wasn't that Russell that wanted that investigated? Mariah, do you remember?
I can't remember. I feel like if that sounds like a Russell thing to do.
So we could probably move past that now that he's in GOC, but we can expect maybe him to we might have to review that for him once this gets out to the full mayor and commission. So questions, Carol, what are you thinking?
I just wanted to review one point he made. I was taking some notes, and he said something about maybe this is a summary of the policy now with new buildings where we want to allow new buildings to use one of three main systems. But before that, you said depending on the building and its purpose and so forth. But then you said something about old buildings, and did I miss something there? I mean,
so the existing policy that's on the books only is triggered by construction, and it's very significant construction. This policy takes a 3-tier, 3-option approach. So Section F has the base construction standards. I'm sorry, I've actually already skipped one. Section E has some base maintenance standards. These are things that central services and other operationally focused departments will continue to do or will begin doing for buildings, whether they're up for a renovation or not. And so, again, we tried to focus on those real must-have items. Construction F has base construction standards. These would apply to all Athens-Clarke County projects, regardless of size. And these are about as prescriptive as I could recommend that you all go. And so it does reference things like the types of plants that might be used, how irrigation systems would be set up, insulation targets, HVAC performance, and so on. But even on those more complicated ones, it tends to actually reference an outside code and then summarize what that code says in a table. And then, so that would be whether you're 2 square feet of renovation or 4,999 square feet of renovation, you're going to hit those standards. The minute you go over that 5,000 square feet point, you're going to do those things, plus you're going to certify in one of 3 systems. And it's my belief that the minimum construction standards will provide a good foundation for certification, but more will be required to actually achieve certification.
Is that good? All right. Jesse, what you thinking?
Thanks. Yeah, I have 2 questions, and then I guess once we get through people's questions, I guess I have 2 thoughts. But my first question is, could you clarify for me like how this would apply to buildings for which we're like a partner but don't entirely own them? So 3, I think, similar but different examples I can think of are the libraries, the Classic Center, and the Bethel redevelopment. Like how much would this mandate changes versus function more like a model the way it would for the private sector?
So it stays with the same approach that has been done with the current policy, which is the current policy says owned and operated. And you could argue that because those buildings tend to be operated by authorities, that it's quasi-government and kind of in the mix or out in the ether. And so it would be upon the commission itself to require compliance when these projects get started. So, for example, yes, Classic Center we're going to approve your project, or we're going to approve your funding, or whatever that decision matrix is, but we want you to comply with the Athens-Clarke County green building policy. And that's been in effect since 2007. And in my opinion, it's worked well.
Okay, so it's my understanding that we could stipulate this in those sorts of partnership agreements, and B, we would have to for it to be guaranteed to be adhered to.
That is correct, and I'll just briefly remind myself here, but I think, well, actually, I would like to correct myself. If you look at B2, there is a difference from the policy here. The current policy says ACC funded and owned or operated. This says funded or owned structures. So you could argue that with, say, the library, we're funding it, so therefore it's going to meet the policy. So that is one minor change here.
Okay.
Hold on a second. Hold a second, Carol. Let me ask this while we're still on that thread. So, funded or owned, because I did like the word operated in there.
Mm-hmm.
Are you saying we lost the term operated, or just we did? Yeah, because if we're helping people pay for the utilities for one of these buildings, we need to be on the beginning, making sure that this is happening for future costs that we're helping fund the operations.
Can you clarify under what kind of scenario you're imagining?
Well, just like the library, if they need funding because their utilities went up so much, we would want to make sure that the next renovation, and I'm not sure if this happened in between the renovations, but I do remember them coming to us needing a lot more money because of the increased cost. Do you remember that scenario? And maybe, so we're a partner with them. It sounds to me like with Jesse's question that we did use this policy for them because of our partnership.
So the way I read the policy now, funded or owned, well, we would be funding that building, so we would apply the policy.
Okay.
You could say the same thing of other quasi-government structures. The reason we went with funded or owned is what if you have a project that's exclusively grant funded, transit or a public safety grant or so on. We wanted to clarify that this would apply here. So there's actually no requirement that Athens-Clarke County operate within the building for us to trigger these standards.
Okay, so funding is the more inclusive term for the scenarios, the three that Jesse just asked about. Funding or owned is a better version.
Yes, with the current thing saying funded or owned and operated. That's where the commission has previously had to say, well, we don't operate the Classic Center, but you're going to do this, or we only own portions of Columbia Brookside, but if you want this pot of money, we're going to ask that you meet this standard. This is a bit of a broader net, but it is it's designed to not capture, say, well, we're putting money into the next Caterpillar expansion sewer line. Well, that's not an Athens-Clarke County funded building,
Okay.
or one that we own. We just may have provided some base standards. So,
okay, Jesse, thanks for letting me clarify what your question was. And Carol, hold your question. So I don't want Jesse lose track of his line of.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so I guess just to try to wrap this in a neat bow, if we're changing it to funded or owned, does that essentially mean that moving forward, all of those types of structures I mentioned, the library, the Bethel redevelopment, the Classic Center, would be default adhering to this policy, and we don't need to keep stipulating moving forward when we approve things?
If I could address that, Andrew. So on a case-by-case basis, so with Bethel, the SPLOST funds are only meant to pay for the horizontal development, if you will, and that means the site, the acquisition as well as grading, streets, infrastructure. So no SPLOST funds are actually going into the buildings. Athens Housing
Okay.
Authority is now the owner of the property, and they will, in partnership with Columbia Residential, have some ownership of the building. So I just want to be clear, right now the expectation is not that this policy would apply to Bethel, and I see Andrew nodding his head. Classic Center, owned by the county. We own all of those buildings down there, operated by the Classic Center Authority. I would expect that the new arena would fall under this policy. And then with respect to the library, same thing. We own the building, operated by a different entity. So the funded portion, Madam Chair, would sweep that one up. Bethel would be the exception. Thank you.
Okay.
That is spot on.
Thanks, Blaine.
Jesse, go ahead.
Yeah, so my other question was about electric vehicle charging stations. I didn't see those in the policy anywhere, so apologies if I just missed it. I tried like control Fing I dug much more into the non-discrimination policy than I didn't scrutinize this one quite as much. So I was more operating on your expertise and sort of trusting. But do we have anything in there about charging stations? I'm thinking especially with this big Classic Center parking deck that's going to come online and sort of stipulating, X percentage of spaces.
Yes and no. So just to put you at ease, it's my understanding that through a memo that I wrote when I was in the sustainability office and that the commission incorporated into the land lease, the Classic Center, any additional parking for the arena is required to have charging stations. In that case, we flagged it and it was in there. Specific to this policy, if you were to go to section F2, Roman numeral 2, it says that anytime we add 14 or more new parking spaces, we will provide a conduit to 5% of them. So that is the below ground infrastructure from an electrical panel to the parking spaces. That makes a future installation of electric vehicle charging dramatically cheaper. It does not specifically say that all buildings will have this because you run into these unintended things where what if you have charging stations, here's a hypothetical, at Rock Springs Park, and then you're doing a project right next door at the police department. It would not be my recommendation as somebody who's worked in the sustainability field that you double up on your stations there until you have the demand to meet it. And so what we're doing is making sure that at any time in the future that change is easy, but we are not requiring those chargers at the time. Now, I will say that for these projects that are over 5,000 square feet, on all of them, they do allow points for installation of charging equipment. And so when we have sites that, let's say right now we're a little light on charging equipment far to the east side and far to the, so if we were going to do a project over in the Gaines School Road area or in Southeast Park, it might be a recommendation that we go ahead and deploy chargers there, and then we would get some credits towards whatever certification was being pursued.
Okay, awesome. Thanks.
Okay, good questions. Staff, did anybody need to comment following that up? And then I'll move to make sure Mariah has questions. And Carol, I think you're next with your hand up.
Can I quickly add one thing along those same lines, Commissioner?
Yeah.
So pre-installing the infrastructure for a retrofit of electric vehicle charging has been a popular activity, and it makes a lot of sense, especially because it's below ground and infrastructure heavy. You've seen communities that have a requirement for solar ready, where they pre-lay interior conduit between roofs and electrical panels, and they make sure the electrical panels are sized. We thought about that and considered it for this policy and actually recommended that it not be included, and that was for two reasons. One is I have yet in dozens and dozens of Athens-Clarke County buildings to find a building where we did not have the electrical capacity needed. So we would basically be stating something that's already done. Secondly, is the market has shown that if I am a private installer of solar and I come to a building that has this stuff pre-laid, they almost always rip it out because they're not going to give you a warranty on somebody else's work. And so in that case, it just didn't make sense to require that extra step.
And Andrew said another way, we don't cut corners when it comes to building buildings. So for instance, we're going to spend a nominal cost to upsize the electrical panel for future expansion, rather than go back and retrofit, which costs way too much money. So that type of planning, I hear you saying, Andrew, really falls into allowing us to be flexible with solar in the future.
That's right.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, good stuff. Carol, do you need clarification on some stuff?
No, actually, I was going to be saying exactly the same thing that Blaine said on the Bethel homes, because I didn't, for the vertical buildings, not applying to this. And I'll read this more carefully, but I'll just be doing more listening here. I think you're covering most of the points.
Yeah, the staff, this is what's good about the committee work with it as well. Mariah, how about you? Is this coming forward like you were anticipating from our work previously?
Gosh, I mean, it feels like it's been so long. It's really nice just to kind of get a refresher on how we got here. And I think
I agree.
Commissioners Houle and Denson, or not Denson, Myers. Yeah. Well, I have asked really good questions. I also had curiosities about sort of like the domain of this set of policies with regards to public-private partnerships and other sort of intergovernmentally funded or operated structures in the county. So I really appreciate clarification on that particular question. But I can't think of any questions that I have of my own right now. Just happy we're finally getting back around to this.
Yeah, me too. Here's a question, because it came up here, and typically if something comes up in committee, then we're either which is fine, explain it to the rest of the commission, but then we're also explaining it as it launches out even more. When a opportunity project comes forward, so we have the big 2020 SPLOST list, and this is going to apply to those projects. Are all of them, I guess all of those on there would be this policy. And clarification on, like Blaine, you did with the Bethel, is going to come when we have partnership projects, right? And then, yeah. And so I was wondering if there's something that we could add in this policy that says, application of policy, whatever this is going to be. Make sure there's a statement in on our partnership discussions about that overlap.
I will say the Bethel project, and I think it's a credit to you all and your vision. I mean, that's sort of pushing the boundaries on, the partnerships. And what I mean by that, the attorneys have spent a lot of time trying to figure out, so how the SPLOST funds go for publicly owned property, and how do we separate that from the private? And of course, the housing authority and using authorities in that way is entirely appropriate. So I hear you, Allison, Commissioner. It doesn't happen very often. I can't think of one. We could put some language in there that would cover that. Probably more likely than not, whenever it does come through, we just as staff, we just need to call it out in the agenda item.
Okay. So that goes back to something that has started, and I've appreciated in the agenda report right before the recommendation. It lists the mayor and commission goals and objectives that apply to that agenda item. And I guess I'm thinking that it's worthy for this also to be one of those agenda item bullet points for clarity. Because I think we were already asking, I think, Mariah, you might have just at the recent meeting asking about this sort of, anyway, I think it's going to be helpful to promote it and make it clear so that we're not explaining it on each item.
Well, if you're suggesting that we might make reference to all policies that may apply, currently those are those roll-up strategic commitments that, at a very high level, what the commission commits to the residents of this community, this is what you can expect. These high-level principles. and this would fall under healthy, livable, sustainable Athens-Clarke County. I'm not sure though that would get to the level of specificity you're referring to.
Right, and you're saying you can't just pick one policy, even though it's really important and we ask about it. You can't really just specify one to be listed in an agenda item.
Well, you could. I just wonder if we will miss something along the way. Andrew, you were going to say something.
So some of this will just, in my experience, has happened in agenda items. This kind of thing, what level of certification is being pursued, shows up in the facts and issues. And we've just been in this weird spot where you all probably haven't seen a building-related agenda item for an Athens-Clarke County building for 2 years or so, although we will have one coming for Costa. So it'll get to be, and also with this, if you look at the policy, it does describe, you have the regular touch points with the commission and the design process. So we have concept and schematic design and construction approval. Well, at schematic design, that is when the planning team will say, okay, we recommend we go LEED, or this is a really good fit for Earthcraft or whatever. Well, that would show up in that agenda report for schematic design approval, where we'd say, okay, here's generally what we want to build, and commissioners, we recommend that we're going to do green globe system on this one, and here's why. So you'll get some regularity on that. I think what I'm actually maybe hearing you say is, well, what's going to tell us when it's not happening? Other than just what has tended to happen in the past is I've seen staff identify it in agenda reports, or I've seen commissioners flag it as just something extra they would like considered, much like we've seen happen with some of the wage policies that this body has been supporting.
Okay. All right. Thanks for helping me process that. Carol, yes?
Yeah. Now I do have a more substantial thought with my head getting into this.
That's how it works. It's good. It's good.
So, and I think Andrew will be able to address this well. These are the standards that this is called our green sustainable, what are we calling this policy? Standards for design construction, right? Mm-hmm. So in here we have buildings that must be, like, the roofs have to be strong enough to hold solar. Okay. But we don't have anything in there to say they have to be powered by solar. That's correct, right? This is what I'm concerned about making clear. So in a sense, in terms of our 100% renewable commitment, these are, in a sense, our minimal standards. And when you're speccing out a building, if this is in the, like, if we're getting the architects in there in the drawing, or like the budget that was created, the budget would be created to get the East Side Library to this point. Okay. What I want to make clear is that we also have our renewable energy fund money, SPLOST money, and there may be places where what I don't want to happen is someone to say, oh, we don't have to put the solar panels on the East Side Library because it's not in this green code. And then me coming along and saying, but we have this sustainability thing. We have this commitment to 100% renewable, and this doesn't match. Is there going to be any problem with that? Because where people are saying, oh, we won't want to put this on there, or this isn't, or confusing the commissioners saying, well, we shouldn't be taking money from the Renewable Energy Fund to put solar on here, even though it's a good idea because it's not in this policy. Does my concern make sense to you, Andrew?
Yeah, and we've seen variations of that in the previous SPLOST. It is not my recommendation that we require solar with all new buildings. Every one of those three recommended systems does have credit for buildings that achieve solar or use solar to in their process. So, and I think we will see more and more of it with our new buildings because the roofs are new, it's energy efficiency. So in the system, the sustainability office uses to prioritize where our solar dollars go. Every time a new building hits the system, it almost immediately jumps to the top of the list because it checks a lot of the right boxes. the expectation has been under the old system, like you're going to get LEED certified, which is the current policy, with the project budget you have. And if that means that there's going to be fewer tables or one less office, then those are the compromises that are made. And so if you adopt this policy as it is, I would say that it's going to be up to you all to decide how the funds are spent.
Well, I'm just wondering, and again, I haven't read the whole policy through, but I'm wondering for clarity if there's a place to put something in there that would be when efficient, applicable, when it makes sense, alternative energy sources like solar may be considered for the building to help meet one of these certification, so that it's actually, I mean, you and I understand that it's in there because it's one of the options you could get for getting one of these, certifications for over 5,000 square feet. But I think it could be helpful and clarifying to actually spell that out in the policy so that people don't come back later and say, oh, this is nothing about the source, this is nothing about the energy sources and the renewable energy sources. Do you know what I mean?
So are you suggesting that maybe we have a clause in there that, various renewable energy sources will be analyzed in the design of the building?
Yeah.
And I guess, Andrew,
may be used to meet one of the certification requirements, just so that it's someone sees it in the policy and doesn't have to go to one of the certifications. So not making it that we have to do it, but clarifying that it is one of the options that we're looking at when we look at these certifications.
Well, I was going to ask Andrew, and certainly as we move forward, is that something typically that we ask the architect or the mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineer to take a look at? Or are we really suggesting there's a new analysis that we might have to consider? How do you go about going through an alternatives analysis of? And I'm sorry to ramble, but this came up the other day, Commissioner Myers. Where we talked about the SEER rating of a particular HVAC unit.
Yeah.
So, what SEER rating do we buy? And Andrew, I guess that's sort of there's a reasonableness test there. I mean, we never get the least rating. We try to get as much as we can for the money, balancing all the cost across the project. And as we move towards, and I think I've said this, and most folks wouldn't disagree that, the easy part is those first few gains, and then as you get closer to absolute, it gets very, very expensive. Mm-hmm. So all that being said, Andrew, what are your recommendations on how this juxtaposes with the way that we look at buildings? Or is it something you need to reflect on?
I'd like to spend some time with Mr. Wharton and reflect on it and give you all something to chew on. My first glance is definitely hear what you're saying. Again, because you can't one size fits all solar. Mm-hmm. A very simple explanation is, is that one panel or 50 panels? Is it, it's roof limited? Are we going to put it on the copper roof at City Hall? And on and on and on. Okay. There's a lot of decision factors, but at a minimum, we could have kind of that, first of all, the reference to the 100% commitment and a kind of a vision statement of it is the vision or the intent of this body to use solar where physically and economically feasible. So at least it is implied that this will be looked at. I really think that we're going to find more and more, if not a majority of new facilities will come out of the gate with us. And frankly, I'm excited to see how we can get storage to be layered into these buildings. But
put that in there too.
Yeah. So maybe it's its own subsection. I just want to put enough in there where it clarifies intent, but doesn't get us bound into a position of it's just infeasible.
Right. I have an idea, since we're coming to towards the end of our meeting, but I don't want to lose steam on this topic. I would like to know what the committee thinks we could move forward, or if we're close enough to moving forward. And let me just run through, and Blaine, correct me if I'm wrong. If this thing was perfect and tied in a bow today and we voted to send it to the full commission, it wouldn't happen until the April meeting, because we've missed the February agenda meeting cycle. Who's typing?
Sorry.
That's all right. And so I just want to see what we can do and where people. Well, Jesse,
Still typing.
I know. He said, Steve, you can mute now.
Actually, that's Andrew.
Andrew's still typing. Oh, I thought it was.
He thought he was muted. Look at that. You
That's
don't
even
see him
funny.
blush often.
That's even funny.
Guilty.
He's in full red. Jesse, do you have some input along this line of what we can do to move it forward?
Well,
Well,
and I'm sorry,
do-
just
yeah.
Commissioner, if I might, I just wanted to correct. So my understanding is if you voted today, then it would make the March voting cycle, because the end of the month is when we turn in, so you would be March, not April, if you voted today.
Okay, that's even better, because we had the tendency to launch things out. Mariah, the last few things we've moved out got bounced back in. So I find us in this thing of wanting to move it on, but then I don't want to move it on half baked either. And then it gets kicked back here to get fully baked.
Well,
So,
I mean, a counterpoint to that is that it's kind of like we have our perspectives and we get these deep dives from staff on policy issues, but it is kind of nice to hear from the other commissioners on further refinement they'd like to see that might not fully unfold in, let's say, a agenda setting meeting, to give us some feedback that then can inform our future conversations as a group. So,
right.
I don't think it's terrible when things come back to us.
Okay.
Yeah. So if that ends up happening, that's honestly okay with me. I'd love, we got the perspective of two new commissioners here today, which I thought was great, and maybe hearing, some thoughts of some of our other colleagues. Maybe there's just some minor tweaks, and maybe there's some things we can dive deeper into with their input if necessary.
Okay. Yeah, I like what you're sharing there. Jesse, what you thinking?
Well, I'm thinking two things, and one of them feels like we got a bit of a mind meld going here. So the first is I'm thinking about carrots versus sticks for the private sector, and it seems like we can't really use this as a stick, so to speak. But I'd like to see us use this as a model for developing incentives that we may enact in the hopefully near future. I imagine this would complement the work we're anticipating doing on the Planning Commission's recommendations for inclusionary zoning and stuff. And so I just ask my colleagues and on the commission and staff to maybe consider pursuing something along these lines further in terms of like incentives for the private sector. But that aside, and I think for later potentially, I am certainly not an expert in this field, and I'd love time to dig into more detail on this document with folks who are, staff and otherwise. But I think that staff does a fantastic job on these matters generally, and I'm working on the faith that they and the Office of Sustainability and Andrew Saunders have done a fantastic job once again. So I'd be in favor of passing this ASAP to ensure we have something on the books.
Okay.
Perhaps like with a stipulation to reassign it back to committee in 6 to 12 months.
Yeah. Well, since we have the projects, yeah. So I think I just cut you off. So go ahead, finish what you were saying about timeline.
Well, I'll leave out the explanatory stuff unless people want to hear it, and just say I'd like to go out on a limb and make a motion to recommend this policy to the mayor and commission as is.
Okay.
And to maybe build into that recommendation, scheduling a reassignment to this body on or before January 31st of 2022 to review the policy with staff and consider changes accordingly.
So what I would like as a committee recommendation, that I like the motion to move it forward. And then if you'll save the comments part of it to be, I'm back to what Mariah said. Let's see what everybody else says, knowing it could come right back here for that kind of stuff. Because if we can get it out now and work, whether it's 2 agenda cycles because of the massiveness of it and how we also have to get the other half of the commission educated on it. I'm wondering if you're okay with us just sending it to the agenda cycle and we can talk about those, revisiting it when we talk about it with everybody else.
I will, I guess, modify my motion to just say we recommend. Do we recommend or approve the policy? We recommend it, right?
We're recommending, our committee recommends it move forward to the full mayor and commission.
All right. Well, I make a motion to recommend we move this forward to the full mayor and commission.
Okay, second. Mariah?
Oh, wait, Carol, looks like Carol has something.
I need to just understand something process-wise here, and I might be totally fine with it. I do want to dive into this more deeply, and I may want to ask Andrew some questions and get some input from my 100% renewable people. If there's room for me to do that while we move it forward, I'm totally fine with that.
Okay, let me get back to the calendar man. Blaine, when does the agenda setting meeting happen?
Okay.
For February's agenda cycle.
It'd be the 3rd Tuesday in February, so the the 16th.
No. I'm talking about the agenda the agenda setting cycle. You're all's meeting with the mayor and the mayor pro tem.
February 10th.
What is it?
February 10th.
February 10th. So the details, Carol, that you were getting into, that he said he needed more time with Mike to flesh out. I don't know if we have enough time to that to be added in, and then LRC looks at it in email on February 10.
Well, if I could also just clarify on a process point.
Right.
So the title that we have on the agenda is a review of the LEED certification program. And just for the benefit of our new commissioners, so our practice has been the mayor assigns a fairly specific topic. And as you can imagine, with all the intellectual capital we have, when it's really dug into, I mean, it can go any number of ways. And what we say is, Jesse, to your point, or Commissioner, that, we've been given a charge by the mayor. We need to return a recommendation that's relevant to the charge, and that you should lobby the mayor for anything that you want to explore beyond that to assign back to committee with a specific charge. And that's what we work on, because there have been, and some of the commissioners that have been here for a while, otherwise we would, not in this case necessarily, but you could go any number of directions on some of these policies.
Right. So the private sector part would be after we get our house in order and do our exemplary thing. Does that make sense, Jesse?
Totally. And I wasn't suggesting building the private sector considerations into my motion at all. Just
right.
The idea of formalizing a timeline for reevaluating this. I guess my thinking is we have a lot of SPLOS projects that are in the design phase right now. Costa, the Classic Center, probably the library soon. It seems really important to me to get this on the books as soon as possible for those, and also just to have something to reference for other developers that are giving us applications and for the Bethel redevelopment.
Right. I concur on that. And then Carol, I guess what we're looking at and knowing that we want to get it out because the other commissions are going to have input. You have your group that you're wanting the feedback for, but I feel good, especially if Mariah seconds it, since she's been studying this a long time too, going ahead and getting everybody else in the loop about what we've been studying and at the point we're at, knowing good and well, we want to keep making it better. I don't think it's half-baked. I'm not saying that in any way, shape, or form. But I also don't want to get in analysis paralysis when it still sits in here. Mariah, what are you thinking?
I mean, I think, I would love to hear from other folks. And I'm happy to second Jesse's motion.
Okay, then I'm looking I'm about to call the vote for us moving.
Oh, we got it.
No, Andrew, what? I'm trying to get it out of committee.
Trust me, I'm there with you. Just to clarify, what you all are would like to move out of committee would be this policy that includes a little bit of additional language about the intent to use renewable energy and support the 100% commitment, which I would say with this kind of overarching intent would go well in section 2, which is the policy statement. We could just have a second paragraph that touches on that. So is that correct, Commissioner, that if y'all move something out, you're looking for just a slight tweak to this that touches on that, and then that would be brought forward?
Committee, is that what you're understanding?
Can you say that again, Andrew? I'm sorry.
I'm fine building that into the motion of what we move forward, or just, I mean, we've got plenty of time, I think, to make it work as a CDO if we had to, too. So,
So the thing is, we can move it forward with the added language from Andrew that we just discussed. And then there would be opportunity somewhere down the line to tweak it in a CDO or revise it. Is that correct? I'm just trying to understand the process.
That is correct. So
Okay.
Andrew and staff, because it's under his thing, and Blaine, now that he's in charge, and Sarah with Sarah of the agenda item, they will make an agenda item to go with our recommendation. It'll get the dates. It'll go all the way back to the 2018 discussion, and the agenda item will come forward so that the mayor and the mayor pro tem agree that it needs to go on the agenda. That meeting is February 10. The full mayor and agenda and the public, the Friday before February 16th agenda, it'll be in there. We'll be talking about it then, looking for a March vote.
And will it possibly be in a work session as well?
No, I don't see this. I don't see this. If when we get to the agenda, the GOC, the other half, the good news is we've got Mike and Russell who's been studying this in GOC, so that might help with some of the spin-off understanding of it. But that's why the sooner we get it out, the sooner we'll know what more is needed either in it. And since it's a committee thing, I think it would probably be less of a commission-defined option as LRC committee modifies it with your input. Mm-hmm. Whether that comes back here, but you see we've got a full slate. Something comes back here, we don't want to lose the momentum of it, especially this one. This one I think is, so I'm good with everybody's motions. Carol, are you clear on it's still amendable? Andrew, can we vote now? All right, so we're going to vote to send this forward. Everybody in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. All right, that's unanimous. So here we are. This is how LRC goes. It's an hour. We got one topic. I would like to summarize. Is it okay? Let's start with day of the month. So is this okay with you guys in the scheme of things? We could move it to the first Monday of Thursday of the month. But tell me what you guys are thinking. I like it during the work week. I think it works better for staff during the work hours, 8 to 9, especially since it's recorded. The public engagement is recorded. Yeah, Jesse?
If we're setting it in advance, I'm happy with any time. And I think during the workday for staff is great. I also probably would prefer it not be Monday or Friday for a lot of the formal and informal reasons. That's unideal. So I think this time on a Thursday is great. I guess my one question is if we bumped it to earlier in the month, would it enable us to sort of speed up the timeline that things move from this committee to the full body for a vote? Because if there's a way to do that, I'd be in favor of that. But
I think so, Blaine, doesn't it?
Yeah, so you asked astute questions, both Commissioners Houle and Wright. So, our deadline for a department to turn in an agenda item is usually the last Wednesday a month, and that gives us a week as the manager's office to review with them and vet it. In the case of the GOC and LRC, these are committees, recommendations coming from the committee. They've been vetted with staff, and as you know, those recommendations are usually a one-page document that summarizes what's being recommended with the attachments. And so I'd only look to Sarah to check me on this. If you were to meet, say, the first Thursday of the month, then it is plausible that we could bring that to the agenda session with the mayor, mayor pro tem, and clerk and others, say in the case of February on the 10th. So you could get in with, within 30 days of a vote if you were to do something like that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that has been part of our rhythm. The rhythm of moving it forward has been it just now occurred to me. It's just one of those things. It's always been a habit. They've always been on the third Thursday. And so I felt specifically last year that we were missing moving forward because of that being at the end of the month. Blaine, do you see anything in your sort of standing or staff's standing schedules for 1 o'clock on the first Thursday? Mine's surprisingly open, and it made me nervous. I mean, it's Thursday after a vote. We're usually, if we've been up late, you've still plenty of time to study it. That would be the one thing. But we could try it as this year moves on to see.
There's no standing meetings for the manager's office that happen at 1 o'clock on the first Thursday of the month. Carol,
how does that look at first glance for you?
No, I actually think that makes sense. Now that I'm in the position for 2.5 weeks, I can see that that would actually kind of slip it in before the work session, the agenda setting. Yeah, I actually think that would be fine.
Yeah. And one time last year on that minimum drink price, the committee came out with some recommendations, and I thought it was going to be on the agenda. But as soon as the mayor and mayor pro tem saw it, they're like, send it back. So I do like that catch net part there, again, because we can get so studied in here with that. So I'll reach out to Ovita to make sure she doesn't have something that is creating a barrier with that. But let's
another benefit too, Commissioner, if there is something sent back to committee, it'd be that 2 days prior on the voting meeting, you'd have the benefit, if it's a minor change, to be able to flip it around real quick and get it back in the cycle. So, which is exactly why the neighborhood traffic calming, that would be beneficial there.
You guys, Mariah had to go ahead and leave out. She had an appointment. So for you guys, and I don't want to rush anything. I want your all's genuine inquiry that's supposed to be happening now to be fed at the right pace. Do you think we should have an hour and a half for this meeting versus the hour? Or do you see that an hour is enough, because we go deep and we might only get to one topic, but it's thorough?
I'll put my 2 cents in here. An hour, although I like the idea of an hour, it does go pretty quickly. So I'd be okay with it being 90 minutes. But you're the one, I'm okay with it being a little bit longer. So there could, because right now, what are we going into 2:04?
Yeah, which one thing is, I don't like to go over. I like to stay with the plan, but I also like to be flexible in changing the plan, because other people are, look how many staff are here ready for their topic. We didn't get to it. And Russell had recommended for this year, when he thought he was going to be on here, that we could get more done if we met for an hour and a half.
Yeah. The 90 minutes, the hour and a half, I think would make sense.
Jesse, is that okay with you?
Yeah, I'm all about that. I think that'd be fantastic.
Okay.
And I'd even go so far as to say, while we've got such a long list of things to work through, I'd be comfortable giving it 2 hours. I'd hesitate to go over that because I think it starts to get pretty mush-brained after 2 hours. But if we did a 2-hour meeting with a 5 or 10 minute break scheduled in the middle, I think that would be fine too. But certainly at least 90 minutes sounds good to me.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing I want to do is if you guys will look at this list next meeting, I'd like to talk about maybe getting the mayor to completely take off that minimum drink thing. So on the agenda next time, we'll start off talking about order of what's on our list, asking the mayor whether we want to get one off of there. Or Blaine, is that something? Well, yeah, we'll do that by committee. And then that way we can keep our rhythm, get the focus in there. If we anticipate a focused meeting that's for longer than an hour and a half, Jesse, we'll keep that idea, but we'll plan for it instead of just running over. But so for now, where does that put us? February 4th, 1 o'clock for an hour and a half. Sarah, you got us set for that? Okay. And just to be clear, Sherry, even though Jesse and Carol and I wouldn't be talking about committee, we're just talking about school district stuff. We shouldn't even be on a Zoom meeting at the same time. Okay.
Anything that could be considered work related to the government.
Okay.
In a group.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Well, I guess Jesse and I'll stay on to talk about school district stuff, and then we'll see the rest of you guys later. Oh, wait a minute. I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Okay.
Hey, before we go offline, can I just share? Sarah, your minutes are fantastic,
This is
and
the best.
like my ability to catch up on a year of work was made so much easier by being able to read through that. I love minutes that kind of break down what people's points were and things. I'd love to see us have more of those all over our government's activity, but I just want to thank you for those. I thought those were really great, and I feel like the people who take notes don't often get enough credit in meetings, but
she's
super helpful.
going to start a webinar for all the BACs on how to make.
I could.
And I'll echo that Sarah, as well.
Yeah, and so wait till the next one's when she's quoting you. It's even better. Everybody, Jesse, I guess we'll just stay on and Todd will close us out.
Bye, y'all. Thanks.
Bye.